Welcome back to Dark Night Scare. In today's video, I am sharing 8 Home Alone true terrifying stories. Stay tuned and please subscribe this channel and like this video. Thank you all. Now let's start. I was 30 years old and living in a shared house with my sister. It was a 2-story place, set up like a mother-daughter home, meaning it had 2 kitchens. My sister took the downstairs kitchen, and I had the upstairs one. She wasn't home a lot, often staying with her boyfriend, who lived 20 miles away. As I mentioned, I'm 30. I shouldn't have let being home alone ever freak me out, but honestly, sometimes it did. This incident happened on a night I was home by myself. I was in the living room watching a scary movie. My part of the house has an open layout, so the living room, dining room, and kitchen all flow into one big space. My couch sits in the middle of this area, which meant that when I was watching TV, my back was to a large part of the room. For someone who gets easily spooked, it wasn't the most comfortable spot to be sitting alone watching a scary movie. I'll admit, in the dark room with only the light from the TV fighting off the darkness, I found myself glancing over my shoulder quite often. I like to think I'm not the only 30-year-old guy who does that. Anyway, after the movie finished, I brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights in the house, and went to sleep. I slept for about 2 hours. Then, around 1 a.m., I woke up, though I wasn't sure why at first. Suddenly, I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like my sister, and it sounded like she was actually inside the house, not calling from outside. It definitely had her voice. I couldn't figure out what she might be yelling. Up to me though, I was still groggy and not thinking clearly. The only thought was that maybe she needed me or was arguing with her boyfriend. So I got out of bed and walked into the pitch black hallway. I switched on the hallway lights and then moved through the living room. I heard my sister's voice again, coming from downstairs. Now I could make out that she was saying my name. I made my way downstairs in the dark, yelling back, "What is it?" I looked for the foyer light switch downstairs, but couldn't locate it. I wasn't lying when I say I was incredibly groggy. I walked down her small hallway towards her kitchen, found a light switch, and turned it on. The kitchen light illuminated her little apartment area, including her living room. The light started dim and took a moment to brighten, but even then, I saw no one was down there, neither her nor her boyfriend. I went to her bedroom, but it was empty too. I called her name really loudly once, but no one answered. Shortly after I yelled, though, I heard something drop to the floor in my sister's bedroom, which I had just checked and knew was empty. I ran back upstairs, practically like a child, and went back to my bed, grabbing my phone. I tried calling her a few times, but she didn't pick up. I locked myself in my room, wondering if I had just imagined the whole thing. Eventually, I fell back asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I had a text from my sister asking why I called her at 1 a.m. I asked her if she was home the previous night, and she said no, she was staying at her boyfriend's house. I went downstairs to her bedroom to see if I could find whatever might have made the noise, but there wasn't a single object on the floor that could have possibly caused it. I'm inclined to believe I hallucinated everything I heard that night. But that's what I want to believe, because the alternative is much more terrifying. However, I've never really hallucinated anything else, or had any kind of sleep disorders. So the vividness of hearing my sister's voice and that sound in her room still really freaks me out. When I was a kid, I was often left home alone. My mum was single for a good part of my upbringing, working as an RN with a schedule that wasn't exactly ideal, and my brother was away at college. This particular night, my mum was working overnight. It was a weekend, and a girl named Molly, who I was talking to, came over. She hung out for a while. We watched a couple of movies, and eventually she had to leave because her parents don't like her staying out late. So, I was left alone to wait for my mum to get back. I kept watching TV in my bedroom, lying in bed. My bedroom is upstairs and right next to the backyard. I heard one of the chairs on the deck outside get dragged. I got up and looked out the window. I saw someone sitting in one of the deck chairs down below. I called out Molly's name, figuring it was her, since she'd only left less than 10 minutes ago. Whoever it was looked up at me, but it wasn't Molly. I immediately pulled away from the window to hide. I didn't recognize the person in the darkness, at least not then. I texted a few close friends in our group chat, asking if maybe one of them was messing with me. The ones who answered all said no and asked what I was talking about. I didn't really believe any of my friends would come to my house to pull a prank like that anyway. Scared to death but still curious, I slowly walked back to the window to look down again. The person was still sitting in the chair, looking up at my window. It was a guy, that much was clear, and he definitely saw me. I quickly moved away from the window again and turned off the TV. I huddled in my bed, basically in a ball with my arms wrapped around my knees. I waited in the dark for a while. I didn't even want to turn on my phone screen because I was scared he'd see the light. I didn't dare move because the window was open, and I feared he'd hear any sound I made. I hoped he'd think I had just left the bedroom. I waited what felt like a solid 5 minutes, thinking there's no way the guy outside could still be there. Finally, I gathered the courage to get up and look out the window again. A part of me died inside when I saw he was still down there, looking up at my window. Instead of running from the window again, I tried to be brave and yelled down, "What do you want?" Then I noticed his shoulders moving up and down as if he were laughing really hard, but at first he didn't make any audible laughing sounds. Then I heard a slight whistling sound coming from him. It sounded like he was laughing so hard he was wheezing. I told him to please go away, then backed away from the window. I went back to my bed. I was too scared to call the police for some reason. I left my room and sat at the top of the stairs, listening. I heard the back door being pushed. He was trying to get into the house. I ran back to my room to hide again. I was 14. I didn't know what else to do. Eventually, I heard the front door being tampered with too. He was trying to push the front door open as well. He gave up quickly, thank God. I closed my bedroom window and drew the curtains. If our doors hadn't been locked, I could have been killed easily. I didn't leave my room again that night until my mum got home around 9. I told her what happened. Her reaction was anger that I hadn't called 911. Looking back, that was very stupid of me. It's one of the many things I did, or rather didn't do when I was young that I question greatly now. This is the story of how I almost died as a young kid, home alone. It was possibly the most intense night of my life, with way too much going on. We were a family of 5. I was 10 at the time. My older brother was 14, and my little sister was 5. It was a Friday night. My brother was out with his friends, presumably causing trouble. Then, a dreaded phone call came in to my parents. All I remember is I was in my room playing a Star Wars video game when I heard my mum start freaking out, crying. I got really scared and hurried to see what was wrong. My mum was on the phone with a hospital. They were calling to tell my parents that my brother had been hit by a car. Obviously, we were all shaken and really scared. My brother's leg was broken, but I don't know what else was said on the phone. All I know is my parents rushed to get their coats on, got my little sister from her room, and asked me if I was okay to stay home alone. I said yes, and they hurried out to the car and left. I was, of course, really worried about my brother, but I really didn't want to go to the hospital and see him hurt. I don't think my parents wanted me or my sister to go either, but they didn't want to leave my 5-year-old sister home alone. It's worth mentioning my brother recovered just fine. His injury is no longer relevant to the story other than being the reason I was left home alone on a Friday night. Before my dad left, he was trying to calm my mum down, telling her my brother was going to be okay. Seeing my dad like that made me feel a bit better. I figured my mum was just being overly dramatic, like any mum would be. I continued playing the Star Wars game for a couple more hours. It was easily past midnight and past my bedtime by this point, so I turned off the TV and PlayStation and crawled into my bed with my Game Boy. I tried listening, hoping to maybe hear my parents' voices or hear if my brother was with them or just make out what they were saying, but I couldn't hear anything. After a few minutes of not hearing them or even hearing them come up the stairs, I got a feeling something was wrong. I went to my door and quietly opened it, then walked over to the landing and banister that overlooked the living room. The lights were off, but I saw 3 tall figures standing in the living room. They weren't my family. I was so petrified I froze for a second, before quietly walking back into my room and shutting the door as quietly as I could. In my panic, it wasn't quiet enough, and I knew it. They must have heard the door click shut, even just slightly. I hurried to my closet door, opened it quietly, stepped inside, and shut the door. I sat behind a bunch of boxes and bags of clothes, stuffed in the closet. I was actually pretty well hidden from view. There was a short period that felt like forever as I waited, anticipating my bedroom door opening, and it did. At that moment, I knew I was going to die. I heard footsteps walk into the room. I couldn't tell how many people it was. 1, maybe 2. I heard the footsteps move towards my bed, and I heard my covers being messed with. Then, silence. Then, more footsteps moving towards the closet door. Then, silence for a few seconds. And then the closet door opened. My heart was in my throat by this point. All I did was sit quietly and hold my breath. The door was open for a really long time, but I didn't look up. I didn't move. It had to be a good 20 seconds of silence before the door closed again. Footsteps walked away from the door, then out of the room. I finally looked up and realized, from where I was crouched down behind the bags and boxes, I might have been visible to that person. It wasn't until probably an hour later that I heard my parents return. I ran downstairs to them. The front door was left ajar by the people who broke in, and they had stolen a number of valuables from our house. It was a night that just went from bad to worse for our family. My parents were in such a rush when they left for the hospital that they apparently didn't even lock the door. I was lucky not to have been killed or kidnapped that night. Looking back now, I really wonder if the person who opened the closet and just stood there for 20 seconds saw me hiding back there. Maybe he was just a guy who came to rob a house, not to kidnap or hurt a child. Or maybe he just didn't see me. Maybe I just narrowly escaped death or injury. I was home alone for an entire week one time when I was still a teenager living with my parents, which was a rare occurrence since my parents don't go out much. My mum's rich friend Patty invited my parents on a trip she was paying for. I'm an only child, so I was left alone in the house. We lived in Newark, Ohio, which is in Licking County. Yes, our county was actually called Licking County. My parents' old house had woods in the backyard and was on a quiet road where only a few cars would pass per day. Usually we had a huge deck in the backyard overlooking the woods. We had a decently large backyard, a little fish pond, and an above-ground swimming pool. This was on a Thursday night. I remember because I'd had conversations with friends about plans for the weekend that day. This was July 2013. I was out on the deck smoking weed with my speaker playing music. That's about the time it started. I thought I heard a voice from out in the woods. I lowered the music and listened for a little bit. It didn't repeat, so I turned it back up. When the music was loud again, I heard a voice from out in the woods once more. This time, I turned the music off completely and listened for longer. There was a voice calling from the woods again, confirming I wasn't just hearing things. A male voice saying, "Hey, over here." He was kind of distant, but not too far. The woods were anywhere from 20 to 30 yards away from the deck, and that's where the voice was coming from. I didn't think for a million years it was someone calling out for me though. Maybe just some kids playing manhunt or something. The voice called out again, "Hey, over here, we need help." This time I realized the voice was too deep to be a kid. And when a voice yells out, "We need help," obviously, that's always slightly concerning. I was getting a little uncomfortable now because I was questioning if these yells were directed at me. Then I heard the voice yell, "Straight in front of you, please come help us." And the voice was coming from straight in front of me, in the woods. Now I had a feeling this was directed at me. I reluctantly called back, "Who is that?" And they responded, "We just need help. We're stuck in the woods." I called back, "What does that mean then?" The voice replied back, "Just please come help, straight in front of you." I got up from my seat, walked down the steps of the deck onto the grass, and started heading towards the woods. I called out, "I'm coming. Where are you?" The voice replied instantly, "Right in front of you. I see you." I replied back, "Wait, are you alone or with someone?" There was no answer this time. I stopped in my tracks, about halfway towards the woods. I had a bad feeling in my gut about this. I started walking backwards, back towards the house and the deck. I didn't even want to turn my back to the woods, because it had taken me that long to realize something was very suspicious about the situation. I made it back to the deck, and the voice didn't say anything else. If they truly saw me, and this was real, they would have said something like, "Where are you going?" at the very least. They knew I was onto the situation, but who even knows how many people were in there? Could have been one, could have been three. All I know is getting stuck in the woods makes absolutely no sense, especially if he or they were able to literally see me. Like, what did their shirt get caught on a branch? I went inside the house and locked all the doors just to be safe. I chilled in my living room for a bit, still high. I think that's why I was more trusting at first, because of how high and relaxed I was. Then though, I heard the voice again, from outside, closer now. Definitely in the backyard, not the woods anymore. I heard splashing of water. It could have been the pool or the pond. I hurried to the window to see. I didn't see anyone at first, but then the voice called, "I see you," with a laugh. I noticed him. At least one guy was visible. He was hidden behind the pool on the other side, and I could only see his head. It was just too dark to make out anything, besides this dark, medium-length hair. I closed the blinds and tried to ignore it. Maybe he'd lose interest if he saw I wasn't entertaining him. He was probably some sick, deranged person who enjoyed messing with people, so I didn't want to give him what he wanted. But my breaking point was when there was a horrible, aggressive banging on the window where I'd just closed the blinds. On the other side, the guy was screaming, "Help!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. "Fuck off, you freak! The police are coming!" I screamed it over and over, trying to make myself sound crazier than him. I heard him start to laugh on the other side of the glass. His laughing started to fade away as I assumed he walked away. I sat back down on the couch, trembling, shaking, out of breath. I sat there for a while, and it seemed like the guy had really given up. I still got a good night's sleep that night, because weed helps me sleep. I wonder if I would have handled that situation any differently if I hadn't been high, though the situation made me more paranoid about who I opened my door to. I'm 23 years old, and I still live at home with my parents. One day, they were both not home, and I was outside playing basketball in the front yard. At some point while I was playing, I looked up at one of our upstairs windows and saw a woman standing there. It wasn't my mom. It wasn't my sister. A random woman. I guess when she saw me looking at her, she quickly moved away from the window. When I went inside and upstairs to check the living room, she wasn't anywhere to be found. I checked every single room I could access. Every bedroom, the bathroom, every closet. Then I checked downstairs, which included the living room, kitchen, dining room, one bedroom, and more closets. Finally, I checked the basement, though highly doubted she could be down there. It's a small basement with a couple of couches, a bar, and 2 closets. There weren't many places for someone to hide, but when I opened the second closet door, I was incredibly scared because I didn't know of any other places someone could be hiding in the house. It was the last unchecked spot I could think of. I yanked the door open, like ripping off a band-aid, and immediately, like I did with the closet before this one, I pushed myself into the closet just in case that woman was in there and I'd have the jump on her. But all I pushed myself into was a bunch of coats and coat hangers. I was so confused. I wasn't going to question my sanity though. I definitely saw that woman, and I knew it. It wasn't the kind of thing you would just so vividly imagine. I went back to the main floor and screamed very loud that whoever was in the house needed to get the F out. I actually screamed so loud that our next door neighbor came over and asked if I was okay. I told him that I had literally just seen a woman at the upstairs window watching me play basketball. He came in and helped me search again. When we couldn't find her, I was left to assume that she must have snuck out through the back door, which I had unlocked after all when I went to grab the basketball from the yard. So my neighbor left. I locked all the doors, called my parents, and told them the crazy story. They weren't too thrilled, but they asked me to make sure nothing was stolen. I did just that, and luckily, it seemed like everything that was worth something was still in place. So, fast forward to that night. I went to sleep after checking the house one more time, just for peace of mind. It was hard to fall asleep though. My mind was racing for obvious reasons. Most people can't relate to seeing a stranger at their window inside their own house. But my restlessness actually helped me out in this situation, and here's why. I was finally starting to drift off slightly. Then, I heard some noises from the other side of the bed. I had the fan on above me, so the room wasn't dead silent, and that's why I didn't immediately turn to my other side at the first sound I heard. But the sound started, human-like. I turned to my other side, and there she was, getting out from under my bed. She stood up, tall above the bed. I screamed so loud, louder than earlier. I jumped out of my bed and tackled her to the floor. I had my hand around her throat, asking her who she was. My doorbell rang. My neighbor again. I had picked a tall, dirty-looking woman up off the floor and was dragging her to the front door with me as she struggled and scratched at me. I still have 2 scars on my right arm from her claws. I opened my front door to my neighbor again, and he let himself in and helped me restrain the woman. That's when I called the police. The whole time we waited for the police, the woman was screaming and cursing at my neighbor and me, threatening us too. The best way to put it, she looked and acted like a meth head currently suffering from withdrawals. When the police arrived, one of the officers knew exactly who the woman was. They had dealt with her multiple times before. Her name was, conveniently, Karen. It was satisfying to watch her be brought into the back of the police car. I let my neighbor know how grateful I was for him coming so quickly to help. That night, my mind continued to race, but instead of being completely freaked out, which I still was a little, I felt this overwhelming feeling of satisfaction, and I can't fully explain why. It happened a little under 2 years ago. At that time, I was living in a small 2-story townhouse and working remotely from home. The layout was simple: a small kitchen and living room downstairs, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. One of those upstairs rooms served as my office. During this period, the unit adjacent to mine, which I shared a wall with, was vacant. Nobody had lived there or moved in for over 3 months. On this particular night, I was working quite late. Outside, it was rainy and cloudy, leaving little else to do, so I used the extra time to get ahead on work. I spent a good few hours sitting at my laptop in the office. The house was its usual quiet self, with only the soft sound of rain tapping against the roof outside. I believe it was close to 8 p.m. when, amidst the quiet clicking of my keyboard, I heard a thump on the wall beside me. Looking over, somewhat confused, I heard it again. This wall was the shared one with the vacant unit, making the sound rather odd. After a moment's thought, I figured it must be the owner checking the property, or perhaps preparing the unit for a viewing the next day. In any case, I went back to working. Over the next hour or so, I heard various random sounds coming from the other side of the wall: creaks, thumps, and similar noises, but they were spaced out. I'd hear one sound, then several minutes of silence before anything else. However, around 9:30, I heard a door suddenly creak open and then shut. This was louder than anything else I'd heard that night, making me feel uneasy. It had been months since the other unit's door had been used, so I wasn't actually sure how loud or quiet it normally was. After a minute, I decided to take a break and leave the office, going downstairs just to check on the other unit. I looked out the front door window, seeing if perhaps the owner's car was there, but I saw nothing. Nothing was parked on the driveway or the road, while downstairs, I didn't hear a single sound from the vacant unit. I figured whoever made the noise must have already left, and hopefully, the strange noises were over for the night. After checking the front door and confirming it was locked, I returned straight upstairs to my office. I wasn't sure how much longer I wanted to work. At that point, I was feeling quite tired and just wanted to relax in bed for the rest of the night. But I told myself I'd do 30 more minutes of work. I closed my office door, sat down at my desk, and focused on getting as much done as possible. During that half hour, I didn't notice any more sounds coming from the vacant unit, just the calm, steady rain outside. Finally satisfied with the work I'd accomplished, and feeling my eyelids growing heavy, I turned off my laptop and left the office. Turning off the hallway lights and entering my bedroom to get ready for bed, a sudden, eerie, and ominous sound echoed through the house's walls. Someone was whistling a slow, soft tune. I stood silently, listening for a few moments, shocked by what I was hearing and how suddenly it started. I quietly walked to my bedroom door and cracked it open. The moment I did, I could hear the whistling much more clearly. It seemed too loud to be coming from the other unit or even from outside. Feeling very unsettled, I started walking down the hallway as the whistling continued, filling the quiet house with its eerie melody. I made my way down the steps and moved toward the back of the house, following the sound. I peered around the corner into the living room. In the dark, unlit room, a man was sitting in a chair, facing away toward the black TV screen, whistling as he stared into the pitch-black room, barely moving. I could only see his general outline, but his hand on the armrest seemed to be holding something, perhaps a small handgun. I knew he must have known I was inside and probably heard me going downstairs. Yet, he never looked back. He just stared forward, whistling. It was incredibly disturbing. I didn't know whether to say something or try to sneak away. Why was he even here? How did he even get in? What did he want? My heart was racing before I suddenly decided to run out of the house. I swung open the front door, still hearing the man whistle as I ran away. I only looked back once and didn't see him following, but I did notice the door to the other unit was wide open. I ran to the end of the road and called for help. When the police arrived, they could hear that same eerie tune being whistled from inside. They approached carefully, went to the living room, and found the man in the exact same position. They said he slightly turned his head to look at them, gave a short, crooked smile, then dropped his gun and allowed them to arrest him. He basically said nothing about why he was there or what he planned to do. Some officers I spoke with thought he might have been trying to get arrested for some reason. But strangely, there's no information on the man, no matching fingerprints or identification of any kind. And without him cooperating, they had no way to find out who he really was or if he had any mental illness behind it all. I don't know how that night could have ended otherwise, but even thinking about other possibilities makes me uneasy. Every once in a while, though, I still hear that same eerie tune whistled in my dreams, making me wake up in a panic, thinking he could be back. I was 16 years old. At the time, I lived in a small home with my parents, sort of on the outskirts of the city. It was in a smaller wooded neighborhood about an hour outside the main city area where both my parents worked. This happened on a regular, weekday. It was cloudy and rainy all day, and everyone was talking about a big storm supposedly rolling in later that night. I didn't really care, as long as I didn't have to walk home in it. Luckily, the rain waited until after school was out, and I got home to really pick up. Usually, these storms are over-exaggerated. But as I watched TV in the living room with the windows open, the clouds got darker and darker, and then the rain got much worse. But honestly, the most unsettling thing was the wind. Our small, old, basically wooden house was creaking and swaying as the wind slammed against it and rain crashed against the roof. In spite of this, I was sure everything was fine and kind of just listened to the storm while watching TV and waiting for my parents to get home. Around 5:30 though, my phone alarm suddenly screamed about a flash flood warning. Not long after, my mum called. She said a lot of the roads on the way home were apparently flooded and it was too dangerous for them to drive, so they'd have to wait it out. I told her I was okay there and the house seemed to be holding up, so it wasn't a big deal. Now knowing my parents were stuck in the city, I got up and found something to eat in the kitchen. As I waited for my meal to heat up in the microwave, I thought I heard something that sounded like a knock on wood. It was so muffled by the rain and wind that it was hard to tell what it was. I figured if it was anything, it was probably just something the wind was hitting against the house. So I ignored it. I grabbed my food and went back to the couch to watch TV. But before I could even start eating, I heard it again. This time, it kind of freaked me out because it sounded like it was at the front door, which was right next to me, and it was the exact same knocking pattern as the one I thought I'd heard when I was in the kitchen. Obviously, this made me think it had to be a person, but someone outside. In this storm really didn't make sense. I was too scared for a moment to even check the door, so I kind of just sat frozen on the couch, waiting. But when nothing happened, I finally got up and went over to check the door. I walked up to it and looked through the peephole. It was mostly fogged over. All I could see were the blurry shapes of heavy rain falling. I looked out there for a while, making sure I didn't see any figures moving, but with no signs of anything, I felt safe opening the door. At first, I was relieved. Nobody was there. It was just the storm outside. But then I noticed something weird. In the mud leading up to the porch, there were footsteps. I couldn't make out the shoe print or anything, but the repeating pattern through the mud clearly showed they were footsteps, and, given the weather, they had to be recent, not washed away already. I felt a chill run through my body before I abruptly closed the door. Was really freaked out and didn't really know what to do. The rational part of me wanted to call my parents, or maybe even the police, because this was really strange with the huge storm and me being alone. But the other part of me didn't want to worry anyone over something that was hopefully nothing. I mean, they weren't on the porch, so they must have already left. At least, that's what I told myself. I stayed more alert, but didn't call anyone yet. I told myself if I saw or heard anything else though, I'd call. I went back to the couch and ate my dinner, keeping the TV volume lower so I could listen to the storm. Honestly, I don't remember much else from that part of the night, because at some point I just laid down and fell asleep, waiting for my parents to get home. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure why I'd woken up, but the whole house was dark, and the storm was just as loud as it had been earlier. I knew some time had passed though, and I was curious how I'd slept so long without my parents coming home and waking me. I picked up my phone and checked the time, immediately seeing multiple missed calls and texts from my parents. They were just asking if I was okay, and said the roads were still too bad to drive, so they had to get a hotel in the city for the night. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, trying to wake up as I processed the texts. And then, I heard probably the most terrifying sound I could have heard at that moment. It was a single footstep on the wooden floor right above me. Not the house being hit by the wind or creaking. It was unmistakably a footstep inside the house, specifically in my bedroom, which was the room directly above me. My heart started racing as I listened for another few seconds. I followed the sound of the footsteps, staring at the ceiling as they slowly moved through my room. Then, they started going toward the door leading to the upstairs hallway. I knew I had to act quickly. I silenced my phone and quietly ran into the small downstairs bathroom in the main hallway. keeping the lights off and carefully closing and locking the door behind me. I don't think they heard me. I opened my phone, turned the brightness down low, and called 911. It was pitch black in there, except for the dim screen of my phone. Once I saw the call timer start, meaning an operator answered. I whispered my name, my address, and what was happening, then went back to staying quiet while keeping the call connected. I was afraid to even put my phone on the lowest volume to hear the operator, especially as I began hearing the footsteps making their way down the stairs. The low thumps slowly echoed through the hallway, with the sound of rain and wind filling the gaps between each step. They walked right past the bathroom door. They kept going until they reached the kitchen, and then a few seconds passed as I waited for the next footstep, and then a few more seconds passed. Before I knew it, I was just waiting for any more sounds or movement, but there was nothing. Several long, agonizing minutes passed until a sudden bang at the front door sounded and police called out. I ran out of the bathroom and opened the door, but it was clear, from the lack of any other sounds inside the house, that the intruder was gone. The sliding back door was slightly ajar, evidence of their eerie absence. Probably, the sound of them breaking in was drowned out by the heavy storm that kept me asleep. But that might actually be the reason I'm still here today. Whoever the intruder was seemed to only go through the hallway, upstairs, and into my bedroom. So, me sleeping on the couch and not making myself known was likely for the best. Disturbingly, though, it seems clear they were looking for me. What's really unnerving to think about even years later is that I never saw the person, so I literally know nothing about them. Man or woman, teenager or adult, someone I knew or someone I didn't know, or worse, someone I didn't know but who knew me. Me and my parents have been pretty on edge for the last few years, hoping whoever it was doesn't try to come back and finish whatever they planned that night. I live alone in a fairly quiet, cozy neighborhood in a suburban town outside a small city. I'd been living there for several years with no issues at all. I knew most of my neighbors and felt our town was just really quiet and calm. Not much ever happened, and I was able to live my life in peace. This was during the middle of spring. I'd finished a long 12-hour work shift and was driving home in the dark around 9 p.m. The roads were empty and the neighborhood was dark, as most people had been staying inside due to the pouring rain for the past several days. I pulled into my driveway and went inside, warming up some leftovers in the oven and resting on the couch as I settled in for the night. Only about 10 minutes after I got home, though, there was a rather loud knock at the front door. I was really surprised by it, unsure who it could be or what it could be for, but I got up and saw a man standing on my porch. He was wearing a black rain jacket and looked completely soaked. I opened the door. "Can I help you with something?" I asked. The man looked at me for a moment. His eyes were droopy, as if he was very tired, and his face was stiff and motionless. He looked a bit older than me, maybe in his early 30s, with a dark beard and longer, brown hair, all soaked from the rain. Finally, he answered, speaking slowly and without much emotion, explaining that his dog had jumped his fence and he was wondering if I'd seen it. I said, "No, I hadn't seen anything." He nodded, seeming to understand, but his eyes drifted past me and into my house as he slowly turned away and walked off the porch. I closed the door. I thought the guy was kind of weird, but maybe he was just very tired and frustrated, especially knocking at night in this rainy weather. I hoped he'd find his dog soon, though. Aside from that, I went back to the couch and forgot about it. I want to say I was sitting there watching TV for maybe 15 minutes before there was a sudden knock at the front door again. Immediately, I was sure it was the same guy, but I had no idea why he'd come back. I got up, very confused and somewhat concerned. Sure enough, when I looked out, I saw the same guy standing there behind the door. I opened it, and this time I wasn't quite as friendly, just straight up asking him what he wanted. He had that same cold look as before. The man pointed toward the side of my house and said he'd seen his dog run into my backyard and asked if he could go look around back there. The way he said it was kind of strange though, I'm not sure how to explain it, but yeah, something was clearly not right. Just to get him off my back, and in case. He was telling the truth. I said, "Sure, you can go back there and look around." He said, "Thank you." But at the same time as I was starting to close the door, he took a step forward, almost as if he thought I was going to let him inside to show him the way to the back door. I just kept closing the door though. I'm not sure why he would have thought that, since he could easily walk around the house to the backyard. I looked out to make sure he left, and he did, going around to the side of the house. After all of that though, I wasn't too comfortable with him just wandering around. So, I went to the kitchen where I could watch out the back door. I wasn't staring at him through the door or anything, but I cleaned up some stuff on the counters while occasionally glancing back at what he was doing. Every time I looked, it seemed like he was just walking around the edge of the yard. Then one time I looked back and his face was right behind the glass, looking in at me. It literally made me jump. I yelled through the glass, asking what he wanted. He called out, asking if his dog was inside my house. What the hell was wrong with this guy? I sternly said no, clearly showing I was getting impatient. But the man kept asking, wanting me to let him inside to look around for his dog. He'd bang on the door every time I didn't answer. I could see it in his face that he was getting unnervingly angry that I wouldn't let him in. It was getting kind of horrifying. As he kept hitting the door and yelling at me, I called the police. Only then, once he saw me take out my phone, did he finally stop and leave, which only made me more suspicious about what he was really up to. Police came and took a report from me about what happened and what he looked like and all that sort of thing. But that's where it ended. There wasn't much they could do right then and there. However, unfortunately, a week later, there was an incident very similar to mine. It's unclear if he forced his way in or if he was just allowed inside by the victims, but the story was almost exactly the same as what happened to me. A man came knocking on their door looking for his dog, only for it to take a terrible turn. It makes me even more disturbed by that night the man came to my place doing the same thing. Had I listened to him or been any more willing to help, I could have suffered a similar fate to the others.